We're in Didrikson Township, Roseau County. It's about 20 miles from Canada. This particular piece is 240 acres. In total, we have 4,000 acres. We rent out about 1,500 and then 2,500 for grass. We have 450 cows and then we run about 800 yearlings. Things are going well for us. We continue to add livestock to it, so it's this transitionary process where you're tying more dollars into more animals, and then it's a delayed process, but there's also a value in that, in building value into the animals. Just because it's not cash, it doesn't mean the value isn't in the business. It's been good, it's exciting for us. We're grain and cattle, and it was just too much to try and move as intensively as we wanted to do. We were always falling behind on either the crop side or the cattle side, and it just wasn't working. We needed to focus on one, and both of my brother and I's enjoyment is on the livestock side for sure. We have a very short growing season, but a very intensive growing season, so we can grow a lot of forage in a short amount of time, and so that is the emphasis on yearlings. We are going to decrease our cow herd even more to make room for more yearlings. Really, our grazing season is 5 to 6 months. 4 months is your real peak growing time, but if you allow for stockpile or allow residues to build up, you will have some grazing earlier, and through covers you can graze longer. But for us, the economic side, we just feel like there's more value to us in how we want to manage our grass in yearlings. And so it's kind of a double whammy where we want to shift from cows to yearlings, but we also need to add more yearlings because of the amount of grass we're producing. So it does pose some challenges for that, for sure.
NRCS has worked with Thor and Dana quite a bit on setting up grazing systems and really the infrastructure and improving management, so fence and water development. And they've also worked with NRCS through CSP for different cropland practices, as well as grazing management enhancements that we offer through CSP. And we've done some different cropland practices with the Didriksons as well. We help them with no-till, getting started in that, and we've helped them out with cover crops as well. And more recently, they're currently working on seeding 80 acres of cropland into a pollinator mix. So for the next several years, they'll provide pollinator habitat, and their long-term goal with that is once it's fully established, they're going to convert that into pasture, which will add more diversity into their overall forage mix. So we've really helped them out with a wide variety of practices over the years.
We've been working with NRCS really since '02. Now it's been Jeff Duchene for the last number of years. It's always been helpful, and it's been a good experience.
NRCS provides a technical assistance, so we help lay out these grazing plans and grazing systems and help you plan out locations for fence and water, and also assist with how the management part of that system. But we also provide some financial assistance to help install that infrastructure. And we also make a management payment for managing the system as well to kind of help offset some of those costs.
We are just intensively managing the grass. This particular site has struggled for a while, and so we gave it a year's rest with the drought. We didn't come in here and graze it last year because by the time it was on the schedule to be grazed, it was starting to go backwards, so we left it, and now we are trying to trample as much of it as we can. So we're moving them 4 times a day right now. Normally we would give them long and narrow strips to trample as much as we can, but with this particular paddock today, with the woods there, we're giving them shorter, wider strips. I want them to trample to add cover to the soil, add more nutrition back to the soil, or fertility. Also, I'm allowing these grasses to produce seed heads. I want to put that seed back down in the soil, create that foot action, hoof action on the ground, and try and thicken up the stand density. I guess I would call it managed grazing, because we're not rotating on a specific time or a calendar. I'm observing the cattle and the grass and moving them based on that. I just like whenever they're moving, circling, I mean, it's even more impact. Yeah. Muss! 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 started, I used to go by gut fill. Now, when we move them as often as we do, their gut never hollows out. The rumen on the left side of the body, if it's full, you'll see a triangle if it's empty. Well, that used to be the time to move them, air quotes. Well, now we move them more on the grass and what that's looking like versus the cattle. And then because of that, then the rumen is always full. I'm trying to balance because I am grazing such mature forage. I want them just to take the top portion of the leaves and trample the rest. And so I'm really more so just watching the grass. On this 240 acres, we put them out here 13 days ago. They'll be here about 30 days, maybe a little bit longer. I'm trying to move as quickly through it as I can because I want to do the same thing on other pastures. And so I want to get there before they continue down the backside of that grass growth chart. I need more animals out here to get the impact I want in a timelier manner. We're moving as fast as we can, but I was hoping to get through each paddock in 4 days. In order to get a good, effective trample, it's taken me 6. And this is what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
There's cover, but we're leaving so much leaf tissue.
Yeah.
Out here, there's 350 animals, about an animal and a half per acre. I would say we could be at a quarter of an acre per animal for the time, because it's all based on time and how long you're there. And right now we're at a density of about 170,000 pounds per acre with 4 moves a day. This whole paddock is about 5 acres, maybe 6. It's kind of an odd shape today, but the previous ones were 5 acres.
So do you set up all your moves for the day?
I got one more to set up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you set up a few of them ahead of time?
Yep.
So we're on the Didrikson Ranch here and we're looking at some of their pastures, and they have adapted a very intensive grazing system, and right now they're moving animals 4 times per day. At times it may not be that intensive depending upon what they're trying to achieve. And they're grazing yearlings here and they're really trying to improve the land. So they're trying to increase the stock density. And when you increase that stock density, really get a more even utilization. And also they're trying to trample a lot of vegetation down. Actual consumption of the forage with what they're trying to accomplish here is relatively light, but with the moving that often and with that many feet in that small of an area, they're trying to get more trample effect so that they put more vegetation and more litter on the soil surface to kind of shade that ground. Eventually, what that'll do is help thicken up that grass sand and put more carbon on the soil surface and into the soil and really improve the forage stand over the long term.
Rest is a common word to use, but it's really about recovery. If it's allowed to rest for 45 days in June and early July, it will have fully recovered if you've had adequate moisture. If it's allowed to rest for 45 days in a drouthier July and August, it has not fully recovered because this is predominantly cool season grasses. We do have some warm seasons coming in that we incorporated that are starting to catch on more and more. But it's just allowing the grass to fully recover before you come back. I mean, I may not see the benefits of this for 3 years, but I'll certainly see some of it next year.
This type of grazing management, what they're doing here is this particular pasture here is about 240 acres, and it's generally been kind of lower producing than what they'd like to see. And so they're grazing it just once in the growing season here this year and providing a long rest to really allow these plants to really reach their peak maturity and then give a long rest for plant recovery. And that should also build diversity, but what that'll also do is thicken the stand density up. In years past I've been out here, the forage stand has been really thin. And part of that's been weather related to some extent, but these plants just needed to go through a full life cycle and then get a long rest between grazings so that the individual plants can build a more robust root system and tiller out and thicken themselves up. I think with the intensity of management they're doing here with moving multiple times per day and then not coming back again this year, that's going to have a big impact on production long term. The forage plants are going to thicken up and the sand is going to become much more dense and be more productive.
I think from a livestock standpoint, It boils down to economics, sustainability, regenerative, all has to be profitable in order to be sustainable. And so from our standpoint, we have a set amount of land that we graze, and we are able to get our stocking rate up, acres per animal down to a much better level. Whereas when this farm was set stock grazed, it had about 500-600 acres of pasture, and we ran about 120 cows. And now we're 2,000 acres of pasture, 2,500 acres of pasture, but we're running 450 cows plus yearlings, and it's just the stocking rate is a lot higher because of our managing the grass, and we need to add more cattle to our herds because we're growing more grass than what we had before. It's just a constant evolution. You grow more, so you have to have more animals to graze it, and that's a part of it. Grass needs to be grazed to be healthy. It needs to be trampled to be healthy. You need to come in and manage that chaos and then move them and allow for a full recovery. And then it builds more grass and it builds more soil, and the circle continues.
The fencing system here is high tensile fencing that's electrified. They have a well up close to the road where they've hooked into the power grid. It's a permanent interior fence, is just a single strand of high tensile. So that's why with a lot of our interior fences, you don't need a lot of wires. A single strand will keep a lot of animals in. Even these yearlings that are 300, 400, 500 pounds, they're trained to electric. They know that if they touch that fence, they're going to get a shock. So they don't want to touch that fence. So you don't need nearly as much infrastructure with electric fencing as you do with barbed wire. So you think about the cost of that, you'd need maybe 3 or 4 strands of barbed wire to do the same thing that the single strand of high tensile is providing, give you that same control.
We have high tensile running down the middle, and then it feeds off. This was one of our first pastures that we set up through Equip, and so it's divided into 8 paddocks, permanent fence, single strand high tensile fence, and then we come in and we divide it up into multiple day moves off of that permanent single wire fence, and then electrifies our poly wire, and then we can tie into the poly wire wherever we need and get more juice. Anything we've set up in the last probably 6 years, we've set up with just one wire down the middle and multiple watering points so that we can just move across with poly wire instead of the 8 paddocks. That way we can create 100 paddocks out here instead of the original 8. I don't want all of these permanent fences because we move them too often. They just get in our way. It only takes us about an hour a day to move the cattle, but the 8 paddock systems that are set up through Equip really are a great place to start. You know, you have well water out, and you have some subdivisions that you can then start to play with 1 or 2 rolls of poly wire. You get a feel for it before you're committed to moving them 4, 5, 10 times a day, depending on what you want to do. It's just a great way to start to get your feet wet.
Currently, the animals are in a paddock that's about 1 acre to 1.5 acres that was split out with poly wire. And now we're going to let them into the next cell. And so Thor set up the next move this morning. And so right now we're just reeling up the poly wire and picking up the temporary posts to let them into this new patch of grass, which is another area that's probably between 1 acre to 1.5 acres as well. And now we're just moving behind the herd to gently coax them into the next paddock that we just opened up for them. So now that we have them in the new pasture, Thor will come back in a few hours and give them the next paddock of grass. So electric fencing is really, both the permanent high tensile electric and the poly wire has really made it feasible to be very intensive with your management at a fraction of the cost of doing other fence types like barbed wire or woven wire. Right now they have the luxury of having a lot of forage versus the herd size they have. They could carry quite a few more animals if they chose to. And some of that is by design, and that they're wanting to build up some of these pastures to build forage. And some of it is they're moving animals right now 4 times a day. So even if you were running a higher stocking rate than what they are, you would still want to manage this intensively to get the most out of your plants. I think it gets even more critical as your stocking rate increases. you need to be more intensive with your management to provide adequate recovery and to really optimize your production per acre. They're only going to graze this one time this year. If you didn't have as many acres as they have, you would probably come back a second time and may not leave quite as much behind as they're leaving here. And that could still be fine from the forage management side of things, provided that you're giving adequate rest for plant recovery. That'd be more typical. Although even some operations I work with that are really reaching a high intensity level of management and are at a higher stocking rate are still kind of achieving similar results with maybe a twice over system as what Thor and Dana are getting here. What I like best about what they're doing here is the adaptability, and Thor has touched on that a little bit, but with using temporary fencing to further subdivide the pastures here, you can really adjust your utilization in any given area based upon what your management goals are for that particular pasture, but also you can adjust the size based on what the herd needs, how much forage you have out there, what your management goals are, current growing conditions. That adaptive management is really the key, where if you were just grazing each of these 8 paddocks as a set paddock, you lose a lot of that flexibility. And you're probably not coming out here as often, so you're more reactive with your management instead of proactive, where they can make changes on the fly really easily just based on what they're seeing every day. And I think that's really the key. If you're really wanting to make vast improvements and drastic improvements in forage production, that's what it takes, is the adaptive management that they're applying here. Thor and Dana have installed a watering system here. When they set this pasture up, they drilled a well and buried a pipeline, 2 water locations here. Fresh water is a big key to grazing management. We oftentimes don't think about that, about water distribution and the quality of water and making sure they have enough of it as well. It's really a key nutrient, and we need to start thinking about water as a nutrient, because that's really what it is. Because if you look at minerals and other nutrients that they're consuming with grass, if we took everything away, feed and water, an animal would suffer earlier from not having water. So we want good water distribution and good quality of water. That'll impact their rate of gain. If they're drinking from some surface water sources that are of poor water quality, it's going to affect the animal performance. With a freshwater supply, we can control that water quality, and that should help our rate of gain out here on these yearlings.
That's how all of our other pastures are set up, is we have multiple watering points. They're about anywhere from 100 to 300 feet apart is the furthest away our watering points are, so this pasture needs to get that added to it. Last year we had good luck with everything really, and especially flies. We started putting sea salt in the water, and that made a huge difference on flies, and so I want to do that again.
When they originally put in the watering system here, it was through Equip. So they received some financial assistance to help them install the well, bury the pipeline, install the water tanks. And of course they've done a little bit more pipe on their own and plan to do some more water development. You'd like to cut down that travel distance that they have to get to for water, because they'll be more apt to come in smaller groups and they'll consume more. If you have a large pasture and they have water at one end, they're more apt to come as a big group. And then if you have a couple of lead cows that want to come to drink, and when they decide to leave, everyone's going to follow them. And when they decide to leave, everyone's going to leave whether they've had enough water or not. And then you get more manure right by water when you don't have as good of water distribution. So when you can get more water distributed throughout the pasture, it's going to impact their whole grazing behavior, and the amount of time they spend at water. They'll be more apt to more evenly spread their grazing and manure distribution across the whole pasture, as opposed to just by water or just by shade. Do you worry about shade at all?
I really don't. We've never made that a priority. And we are far enough north that I don't know that needs to be a concern of ours. I think it's more just making sure they have access to water all the time. And that well water, I mean, it's 38 degrees in the tank. I would have liked to have cut this in half again, just to hit these a little more.
Oh, yeah.
Get these little saplings. Because with the one time a year graze, these are able to come on unless the density is high enough, which is fine. It adds to diversity, it adds to shade and wildlife, but I don't want it to creep too much.
Yeah, you don't have to take over.
Right. And we've grazed in the past too, where we're grazing through 1.5 feet of snow, because as long as it's not iced over, the cows will dig, or they'll go through the snow up to their ears. And so you can get through a lot of snow if you have the forage there for them to graze. The other thing is, if you leave forage like this, and this is what we've done in the past too for cows, is we wouldn't graze something all summer. So then you have this tall, 4 foot tall forage that it's almost hollow underneath, where the cows, once they get through that blanket of snow, they can dig through and graze that. And so there's a ton of different options and ways to extend your grazing season or to maximize the pounds per acre that you got during the growing season, whatever a person's goals are. I know there's people like Jeff that know how to help you design a system and a grazing chart to help you get those goals met.
So there's a lot of benefits to manage grazing. Of course, you have the production benefits. On the production side, you're hoping to increase forage production and with that improve livestock production. But there's a whole host of other benefits on the conservation side that benefit not only conservation but also forage production and livestock production. And some of those conservation benefits really are when you start to manage a forage, leave more residual behind and provide rest for plant recovery. You can improve infiltration. You know, an overgrazed pasture that's grazed down to the ground, you have a lot of runoff. So improved infiltration is a big deal. So with that, you have less runoff. So you think about that from a production standpoint, if you can infiltrate that water, the soil can store that water and those plants can draw on it for later use. If it runs off, those plants in that pasture aren't going to be able to utilize water that they don't have, that ran off. And when water runs off, it's rarely just water that runs off. You have other things that might run off with it. You could have soil and sediment and anything that binds that soil and sediment. So nutrients, if you've applied any herbicides or pesticides, things like that have residual, that could be running off and getting into our surface water. So there's a definite water quality impact. And that's where, you know, managed grazing systems are really a win-win in that regard, because we're keeping the vast majority of the water on the land and really minimizing the amount of soil that's going into our waterways and nutrients that are going into our waterways, so we can reduce that sedimentation and that nutrient loading. Those are huge conservation benefits by improving grazing management. And then just when you're growing more plants, you know, we only ever look at the above ground part of the plant, but there's a whole root system below the plant as well. Well, when you're providing adequate rest and leaving more residue on the soil surface, it's almost like a mirror image. If a plant is short above ground, it can't support a very well-developed root system below ground. So once you start changing to a management where you're letting forages grow tall, like what we're seeing behind me here, not only is that above ground part of the plant growing taller and more productive, but that root system is as well. So you're able to access more moisture and nutrients from the plant growth standpoint, but you're also putting more carbon in the soil. So that carbon sequestration is a big benefit. And then just with the ability to grow more forage. So when you're growing more forage, you can graze more days with the same animal numbers, or it may allow you to increase your herd size, or maybe a combination of both. Let's say you just graze more days. If you're able to pick up 3 weeks or a month longer grazing season, well, that's that much less feed you have to make. Less machinery use, less fuel use, less labor, so there's a lot of benefits there, just both on the production side, but also the environmental side of that. Work with Thor and Dana has really been successful both for them and for NRCS. The amount of change they've made and benefits they've made on the conservation side and also the production side has really been quite profound, I think. Just their increases in grass production with the intensive grazing they've done, NRCS helped them start with that, but then they've taken it really to the next level just through learning on their own. And I talked to Thor and Dana quite a bit just on bouncing ideas off of each other, and I've learned a lot from them as well. I probably have learned more from them than they've learned from me over the years as they've tried different things to really try to make improvements on the grass management side of things and the livestock management. I think they're really a showcase for what you can do with grass management. They can really grow a lot of forage here. And with that, and just the changes they've made, it's not only affected forage production, but it's opened a lot of doors even for creating different wildlife habitat out here than what you would typically find. I think with this particular pasture here, they're only going to graze it once. We're in the middle of July now, and several of these pastures haven't been grazed at all, so we're providing some undisturbed cover, some different cover than what you see surrounding. There's a lot of pastures that are grazed more regularly and more closely to the ground. That's providing more of that lower cover type for those species that like that. But then you also have in CRP and things, you have that undisturbed cover that's providing that habitat type. But we don't have a lot of this intermediate habitat type that they're able to provide, especially here where they're just grazing it once, they're moving the animals off, and you have areas of this 240 acre pasture that are in varying heights and densities. So I think it's really a win-win on many levels, both for the grass production and livestock production, but also conservation-wise and what we've achieved here with the improvements in wildlife habitat.
The biggest importance for us with regenerating or building up our land is that continued profitability goal. You want to make it better than what you got it. That's been a philosophy of ours for a long time. My dad, he did the best he knew how with his knowledge and training. And so for us, if we can grow more grass, run more cattle, maybe we can make room for the next generation without having to buy more land. The more we can build it, the more we can add. It's a quality of life thing too. If you're running out of forage in the middle to end of the summer, that reduces quality of life. If you can add more people because you've allowed more forage to be produced on the same acres, now there's less workload because you can take family vacations or you can take the weekends off or rotate through the days so you don't have to do it every day. The meat business has been something that we've added. Didrikson Farms meats, I think we're 5 or 6 years in now. We started selling quarters and halves, and then we quickly saw the value in retail. It's been a good branch off of the operation, and it's been a nice addition to the place.
So if anyone's interested in trying to make improvements on grazing management on their farms, the place to start would be to stop into your local NRCS office. The local staff can help you out, or they can put you in contact with grazing specialists like myself to help develop a grazing plan that will fit your goals and objectives, and also improve the forage management.